nurse. Look at what them a feed the little youth them in a school. Pizza, cow milk and the whole canned food. Canned tuna, canned beef, canned chicken soup. This is why them operate with canned attitude. What make them wonder why the younger youths rude. Candy made available if we put them in a mood. Sweet sugar cookie, cotton candy balloon. And them we show the youths man they fall from baboon. I am not a monkey but them a cartoon. I a king born with golden spoon. My people got empires done, build up on the moon. So check the fire tune. There are clowns around us, running a circus. Look how hard and how long them try work us. Plotting fi hurt us, vaccine insert us. For money, them kill the ghetto youth with them virus. Clowns around us, running a circus.
What is up, guys? How's it going? Today's video is about Daniel chapter 2 as well as Daniel chapter 7, and I'm going to be talking about specifically the legs of iron and what kingdom was the legs of iron. A lot of the people that have studied the Bible think that it's the Roman Empire, which was spoken of, from back then, as being the legs of iron, and I do think there's some validity to that. But I've also been wondering if the legs of iron could potentially have been the millennial kingdom, the 1,000 years that's already passed. Because it's described as having ruled with a rod of iron several times, and so we're gonna be studying that in today's video, and we're also gonna look at Daniel chapter 7, as many people believe that it also mirrors the prophecy or dream of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with Daniel chapter 2. I'll read the whole chapter and then we'll talk about it. Not the whole chapter, sorry, but I'm going to start from verse 31 and then go down through verse 45 here. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these things. And as you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with that of soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, So they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms, and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. So, that's the main verses that we want to, imagine here, is this statue. And I've got some pictures that we'll look at as well. But the most, I guess the part that's kind of interesting is just the iron, talks of, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these things. So it specifically talks of the iron breaking and crushing, and so, but still, the rock, obviously, which is not cut from a human hand, being the chief cornerstone, that the builders rejected. Obviously, that's Jesus. So when his kingdom comes down and his everlasting kingdom is set up, the question is this referring to back then when he came back during Armageddon, and his kingdom was set up during the 1,000 years, and is still an everlasting kingdom, because his people, his body of Christ around the world, around earth, is still his everlasting kingdom. We are his kingdom. But that's one way to interpret it. There's also the other way of saying that his everlasting kingdom doesn't actually occur until Judgment Day, after Judgment Day, when, New Jerusalem is going to drop down out of heaven. So that would be another way to look at it. But I would say that this one actually leans towards it having been the kingdom of iron having been already before Armageddon, and the reason being that which was let's say 1,300 years ago, roughly 1,300, and however long it may have been, we don't know the exact date, but then there, I would agree that it's probably the Roman Empire is what that would be referring to. And then I don't know what the iron and clay would be. Maybe the Romans mixed, they lost a lot of their glory, and then they mixed with somebody else. I'm not really sure on the history of all that. Maybe some of you guys in the comments, if you know more about that question, you could answer it for me and help us all out with that. But who the iron and clay could be, because I don't really know who that would be. But I'm going to go ahead and show you now some verses that refer to the rod of iron that Jesus rules with during the 1,000-year millennial reign, and we'll study where that's referenced. So the first reference to the rod of iron is in Psalm 2:9, and I'll start at verse 7. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, "You are my son. Today I've begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel." Now, therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. The next reference to the rod of iron is Revelation 2:27. And this is the English Standard Version, by the way. That's what I always use. So, and it's in the church of Thyatira verses down here. So I'll start with verse 24. But to the rest of you in Thyatira who do not hold this teaching, who have not learned what some call the deep things of Satan, to you I say, I do not lay on you any other burden. Only hold fast what you have until I come. The one who conquers and who keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule with them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as I myself have received authority from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So this is where he's saying, to the church of Thyatira, hold fast until I come, which was back then, so before Armageddon, to the one who conquers to keep my works until the end, to him I give it, I will give authority. Those will be his saints, basically, because they kept his works until the end. He gives them authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. And then also we have Revelation 12:5. And that's with the woman and the dragon. So I'll start at verse 1. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and in agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So, and there's actually more to this, when Satan gets thrown down to earth right there. Boy, I might have to make a different video about that whole topic. Yeah, I think I will. I'll keep it separate. There's a lot to talk about here. But specifically, I just want to talk about the rod of iron right now and the legs of iron and whatnot. So, this to me with, the woman in heaven and the great red dragon, I take this as being, right now I take this as being Mary and Jesus. And, the dragon stood before the woman was about to give birth. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. So I just have to assume that's Jesus then at that point. Otherwise, I'm not sure who else they could be talking about here. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And then she flees into the wilderness, and of course there's she's nourished for 1,260 days. I right now I take that as 1,260 literal days rather than years, which would have been back then, having. But there could be something mysterious to this 1,260 years if there is a connection there. But I'm not convinced on that one yet. So. And finally, for the rod of iron references, we have Revelation 19:15. And I'll go ahead and start with verse 11. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So there's no question this is Jesus, and in his return, and then he rules the nations with a rod of iron. So that would be the 1,000 years. And so like I said, the question is what was the leg, who were the legs of iron? To me, I at this point I'm gonna say that my thoughts about the millennial reign being the rod of iron, I'm just definitely not sold on it. I think it's looking like probably this Roman Empire, something like this is very likely to be the case right here, where, and it's funny how they call this end times right here, because to me you could replace that with the word like Armageddon, which is what happened. Another thing is that the rock breaks the entire statue, including the legs of iron. So if the legs of iron was the millennial kingdom, then the rock coming down and destroying his own kingdom would seem kind of weird as well, I suppose. But also it could just mean kind of destruction of the entire earth as well. But because everything shatters into pieces, this entire statue does. And then there's many interpretations as to what these different kingdoms are. I just dug up a few, but there's even more than the ones I'm showing you here. These guys are saying, Islamic Caliphate for the, but that would probably be in their pre-tribulation theology. Somehow that would probably make sense to them. But since we're in this, post-Armageddon, post-1,000 years theology, millennial past-millennialism, then we don't really, we wouldn't consider that. Same thing kind of here. This guy's interpreting the very common, you will see this one with the Babylon, Persian, Greece, and Rome. And then here he's saying Islam, which I disagree with that, So my question still is about the uncleaving two kingdoms that try to marry. I'm still not sure who they were, what we would call them, what we would classify that kingdom as. But like I said, if you have any ideas, let me know. And then this guy ties into the Daniel's 7 vision of the 4 beasts is the same, he says, as Nebuchadnezzar's dream statue. And so I always thought that was kind of interesting. So we'll read that right now. I'm going to go ahead and read the entire chapter of Daniel, chapter 7, and then we'll talk about it, because the whole thing's pretty good and interesting to what we're talking about. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then, as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued, and came up out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked, then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall never not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet, and about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. The horn had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, his horn made war with the saints, and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, As for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, and be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So it definitely does look like it's tied together. The two visions. Let me pull up a picture. This one right here. This is one of the best ones I found on this topic. It's got the gold, silver, brass, iron. It pretty much lays out that, that common Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greece, Rome as being iron. And then they have divided kingdoms. And then over here, he's got the Daniel 7 interpretation of the 4 beasts that go down, as well as the 10 horns being the divided kingdoms. So that to me is like a really good match. And then he says judgment right here. And I would say Armageddon in this one would be a good switch you could do. Because that's not Judgment Day, because now he says Christ's kingdom, which would be your 1,000 years, and after it's an everlasting kingdom. Even after the 1,000 years, it's not like his kingdom goes away. He's still ruling in his power. It's just that Satan is allowed to deceive the nations for a short time, for whatever reason, but. Yeah, so and here he says, let's see, judgment scene, and then kingdom given to saints, but kingdom is given to saints during the 1,000 years, if you read it as well. So, and the stone fills the whole earth. But I definitely wish it was a little better quality, but this is a good one right here. I like this picture quite a bit. This guy, he says, they call it the revived Roman Empire. I've seen that on some of them as well. That's what they're calling the clay and iron mixed together. That apparently there was a Roman Empire and then a revived Roman Empire is what, so. But again, that could be, this is all just, you guys can give your own opinions. There's no real right or wrong answer here, other than I think I'm getting closer to the right answer by just continuing to study on it. And a lot of these, they say call it future Rome, or they say it's future times, referring to our times. But, us being the clay and iron mixed together, you could say that, maybe our worldwide kingdom, as, this new world order, as they're calling it, could be a kingdom of clay, in the sense that we're the lowest form of civilization kind of that's been around. In terms of our architecture and whatnot, it's nothing like it used to be. I mean, back in Nebuchadnezzar's time, they still had giants around, and they were building, things just beyond our description almost. And then as these, these kingdoms went down with silver and bronze and iron, they were still worldwide kingdoms, starting with the bronze one, was the first, I think, worldwide one that it mentions, but they were degraded in their glory in terms of their probably their grandeur, let's say. And so we could say that in today's world, looking around at our buildings and whatnot that they build now, we're certainly the kingdom of clay, let's say. We don't have that grandeur at all anymore in a lot of our stuff. So there could be that argument made that we are. Again, I'm right now leaning towards that this iron and clay kingdom already happened. This was before Armageddon, basically, just before. This would be kind of that final 70 years, let's say, maybe, right before Armageddon, possibly, as the old glory of Rome fell apart and the new kind of kingdoms were making their way. So that is mostly what I've got on this topic for you guys. I do want to talk about the Ancient of Days that's described here, because it does give us a little bit more clue. If we want to look at this as being in chronological order, he talks about the four beasts, the horns, and everything like that. And then he goes right into the Ancient of Days. And it's interesting because he says, he speaks of the Ancient Days took his seat on his throne with the flames and the wheels, flaming wheels, and then the servants and the tens of which is 1 million, actually stood before him, and the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So this, to me, it's just interesting because it's kind of like Judgment Day. Obviously, the Ancient of Days being, God the Spirit, and so it's just interesting that chronologically, when it goes straight from this kingdom of the horns and everything right into Judgment Day. So that would kind of lean us towards almost an interpretation of that we are the clay and iron times. So it's I think this needs more scrutiny, more study and scrutiny, and I would love to hear your guys' opinions and about this as well. So, because I'm trying to figure this one out still a little bit. Yeah, and right here in verse 11 it says, I looked, and then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season of time. So this is really weird, because this makes me think about, this would be Satan. The beast was killed and its body destroyed. This would be, to me, being the final of instance of him being thrown into the lake of fire, if this was referring to Satan. But then it says, for the rest of the beasts, their dominion, it's just weird. Again, this could be, the beast, the false prophet, that were originally thrown into the lake of fire before Satan is thrown into the lake of fire. Yeah. You know what? I take that back. I'm not going to relate this to Revelation 20 at all, because you know what? This is specifically referring to the beast he's talking about in chapter 11 here. So I'm just forget about what I just said about all that. Yeah, I mean, really, he's saying that the beast being a king or a kingdom, really. So this would be more referring to maybe Rome getting destroyed and everything like that. The fourth beast being the most interesting thing, because it talks about it a lot. And the fourth beast has the teeth of iron. Okay, so there's the iron again. It's also number 4, which is number 4 down on the statue. And it says it's going to break everything into pieces. So everything lines up with these two visions between chapter 2 and chapter 7 here, I would say. So I definitely really on board with that. So that's all I got for you today on this topic. I probably will do a follow-up video on this one eventually, just if I want to study it more and just ponder on it more and think about it and kind of go line by line, verse by verse, and really try to piece this together so I have a really good understanding of which kingdoms we're talking, or what here. I want to come to like a final conclusion on this topic. So thanks a lot. God bless you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.